gives me great pleasure on behalf of the Board of Directors of BIBA to welcome you to our 7th annual business mission to the UK. BIBA is a non-gov business association with elected members, which aims to further Anglo-Egyptian economic relations and interests, and to assist our UK and Egyptian members in reaching and furthering their business interests. As BIBA, we work closely with the government of Egypt and with the UK stakeholders to promote Egypt and realize Egypt's economic plans. Despite many challenges, the last 6 years, Egypt has witnessed a seismic transformation and continues ahead to reach its Vision 2030. Mega opportunities lie ahead for businesses to tap into, while Egypt is changing and migrating to a green economy. Egypt has an abundance of renewable energy resources with the ability to fill the energy gap which Europe is currently facing. And this makes Egypt quite attractive. We have come a long way during those 6 years, and we still have a long way to go. Yet, from a personal perspective, I'm a businessman in my real life, so like investor like most of the attendees here, and I work in 20 countries, and I can say from my experience in working those 20 countries, Egypt is quite good when it comes to doing business. As a matter of fact, the gain is much greater than the pain. Returns are very good if you're in for the long term. Even if you're in for the short term, you still make good money, make good returns. But those who have took the long-term approach, they have been very well rewarded, and they continue to be so. Now, with Egypt hosting COP27 in November this year, sustainability, of course, is high on the agenda. As part of BIBA's role to support Egypt's sustainable development, our business mission this year has the theme Road to COP27, Bridging the Implementation and Financial Gap. During the 4-day mission, BIBA aims to promote investment opportunities in Egypt in the strategic sectors, including finance, green finance and bonds, healthcare, infrastructure, renewable energy, including, of course, green hydrogen, and the opportunities in the Suez Canal Economic Zone. The mission combines meeting with public officials, networking, business to business, and the one-on-one meetings. I'm also proud to announce that BIBA, along with our partners, the EBBC, will be organizing a business forum parallel to COP27 in November in Sharm el-Sheikh this year. I'd like to thank all the Egyptian and UK officials who are joining us in the 4-day mission. And today we have this special discussion entitled Build Back Better World, Leveraging Partnerships to Drive Adaptation and Resilience in Egypt. The session will be discussing Egypt's economic and sustainable development, Egypt's hard-earned climate development gains, building climate resilience, and stirring ESG commitments and responsible business practices. Dr. Hala Saeed is supposed to be joining us virtually. We have some problems in communication, so we hope at some time during the day we would solve this and she would be joining. But meanwhile, I'd like to also welcome with us here Engineer Yahya Zaki, head of the Suez Canal Economic Zone, who will also be joining. I'd like to also welcome Sir Jeffrey Donaldson, Special Envoy, Special Trade Envoy to Egypt, and a long-standing friend of Egypt and BIBA, who will also be addressing us today. We have with us as panelists today Ayman Suleiman, CEO of the Sovereign Fund of Egypt, Mr. Mohammed Abdallah, CEO of Vodafone Egypt, Dr. Sharif Al-Khouli, partner and head of MENA for Actis, and Emma Howard-Boyd, chairman of the Environment Agency, and ex officio board member of the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and interim chair for Green Finance Institute. The session will be moderated by Dr. Amalie Amin, MD and Head of Climate at the BII. Of course, I'd like to thank BII for hosting us today, and without further ado, I leave the floor to Sir Jeffrey Donaldson.
Thank you, Khaled, and Your Excellency, Ministers, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for making time to be with us this morning. And for those of you who have come from Egypt to be part of the delegation, you're very welcome in the UK. I'm glad that we are able to travel to each other's country again, and we see, hopefully you will find in London, a greater degree of normality than we've enjoyed in recent years. So it's good to have everyone in the same room and close together again. Delighted to see so many friends here. Also, His Excellency, the Chair of the Suez Canal Economic Zone. Welcome to London again. I've been the Prime Minister's Trade Envoy to Egypt now for, I think, 7 years. And I've really enjoyed my time in this post because I've seen an exciting transformation in Egypt in terms of the market that is opening up, the investment reform that has occurred in the country, and in that relatively short period, I've heard very positive feedback from UK companies who are based in Egypt, some of them long-term in Egypt, but some of them recently entered the market. And the feedback has been very positive. When I became Trade Envoy, there were problems with various aspects of investment, the investment laws, getting money out of the country, and so on. And today the situation is transformed. The feedback I get from British companies is nothing but positive. And the opportunities that are there are, I feel, evident. And as we look ahead to Egypt taking on the role of hosting the next round of COP, I think there's a great opportunity to showcase Egypt in a very positive light, because it is, for me, one of the fastest growing markets in Africa, with a rapidly growing population, and the opportunities in the country are evident. So this morning I just want to say a few brief words about that. And I'm delighted, and I congratulate my friends in BIBA for pulling together this visit, this delegation. Also the Egyptian British Chamber of Commerce, who are, as always, strong partners for BIBA, but also constantly promoting Egypt here in the United Kingdom. I've had the privilege before COVID. We've traveled around the UK, visiting chambers of commerce, meeting businesses, making the case for Egypt, and we've had trade missions to the country, and many of the companies who've taken part in those trade missions have successfully gained orders, contracts in Egypt. Some of them have even moved into the market itself. And we've seen partnerships developing between UK companies and Egyptian companies, which have been very effective. And also success on the part of UK companies in winning large contracts in Egypt, from renewable energy right through to the development of Egypt's infrastructure. And in the Suez Canal Economic Zone, I see one of the biggest global opportunities because of the geographical location of that zone. It offers the opportunity for UK companies to have access to multiple markets and to have a base on the zone with many benefits that accrue from being located in the Suez Canal Economic Zone. But access to North Africa, to East Africa, to the Southern Mediterranean, to the Gulf states, within a relatively short travel time. you can cover a lot of the growing markets of the world. So I'm always very happy to be promoting the Suez Canal Economic Zone, and I hope more UK companies will look at that opportunity going forward to be located in what is a very strategically important position there. And the UK government has made Africa its absolute #1 priority in terms of developing our export potential and developing our overseas investment. Africa is a huge opportunity for the UK, but also, and that's not talking about exploitation, it's talking about partnership. It's talking about working together with African nations. And several years ago, when the Prime Minister asked me to become a trade envoy to Egypt, it was precisely because the UK could see the developing opportunities in Egypt. We could see a little over the horizon and see that Egypt was going to be one of the leading trading nations in Africa. And so it is, the gateway to North Africa. We have a large trade team now based in Cairo, not just dealing with the Egyptian market, but also helping UK companies enter into the African market generally. So Egypt has a lot going for it. And of course, it's taking great steps ahead of the COP27 presidency in November. And last time I was out in Egypt, renewable energy was much talked about. UK companies are very much involved in developing renewables in Egypt and have been very successful in that respect. Delighted that today we have the Minister for Electricity with us, and I have to say, his ministry has been very cooperative with the UK in opening up those opportunities for UK technology, UK innovation to be applied for the benefit of Egypt. And Egypt now is self-sustaining in terms of its energy, but is beginning to export its energy as well. And I think that's a remarkable transformation and a testament to President Sisi, the administration there, and the policy to drive forward Egypt's economy, and energy being a big part of that. But of course, as the President has said, the most important thing for Egypt is its human capital. And that means priorities such as education and healthcare. And these are other areas where the UK has been working in partnership with Egypt, sharing our expertise and experience, for example, in the field of healthcare, whether it's helping using our experience of GP practices to in primary care to support the Egyptian Health Service in developing similar models within their health service, and in education. Many of the big UK educational businesses here, exam companies, companies running courses, vocational education in particular, are now present in Egypt, helping to develop, especially vocational education, those young people. 1 million young people coming onto the market in Egypt every year looking for employment, very quickly moving to 1.3 million now. There you go. Well, any advance on 3 million? It's fantastic, but it's also a huge challenge. And credit to the Egyptian government for prioritizing this, and the UK for getting alongside Egypt in helping to develop that. Egypt is also important not just for its economic prowess, but its geopolitical positioning in the Middle East. The stability of Egypt is fundamentally important to the whole of the region. And that's why, again, the UK sees Egypt as a priority. Having that stability in the Middle East as the largest Arab nation, demonstrating that it can be successful, that it has a vibrant economy, that it has the potential to drive forward growth, and that stability is absolutely essential to that kind of economic progress. So all of these things mean that we are heavily invested in working with Egypt, not just because we see the opportunities, but because for the UK, a stable, successful, prosperous Egypt is important. It's fundamentally important to the stability of that entire region. I've been impressed by the reforms that we've seen brought forward in Egypt, investment reforms, other reforms that have, I think, made it a lot easier, a lot less challenging for UK companies to invest in Egypt. Those reforms are working, and we've seen the benefits of them for UK companies moving into the market. And we're looking forward to further trade missions from the UK. So if you're a British company, a British business here this morning, and you're interested in Egypt, I really do encourage you to look at this. The Egyptian British Chamber of Commerce can help provide you with information. Our trade team here in the Department for International Trade, our trade team in the embassy in Cairo, and of course His Excellency the Ambassador here in London and his trade team based in Mayfair, all available to help your business examine, assess and exploit the opportunities that there are in Egypt to do business, to trade with Egypt, to invest in Egypt. Thank you all for coming this morning. Thank you for supporting this event. Thank you to BIBA for the huge effort they've made to bring, I think, probably our largest delegation we've had, the inward delegation we've had from Egypt for some time, which I think demonstrates the interest that there is in building and strengthening the UK-Egyptian relationship, trading relationship, investment, cultural, and in many other ways. I think there is a bright future for the UK and Egypt working together as we seek to expand our presence in economies outside of Europe, in particular in Africa. So thank you for the opportunity to say something this morning, Khalid. Unfortunately, I can't stay too long because the problems of Northern Ireland are beckoning. And believe me, I'd much rather be here listening to the opportunities in Egypt than trying to fix the problems in Northern Ireland. But I have to fix the problems in Northern Ireland so we can have the opportunities globally, as well as our own opportunities as well. I've had the privilege and pleasure of taking a number of Northern Ireland businesses to Egypt during my time as trade envoy. And they're thriving now. They're doing good business in Egypt. And I'm looking forward, hopefully, when I become a minister in the government back home in Northern Ireland, to continuing with that success and building an even closer relationship between my part of the United Kingdom and Egypt, which will always be dear to my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Jeffrey. I'll have to apologize for not introducing myself because I just started like that. My name is Khalid Nasir and I'm the chairman of BIBA. Anyways, I want to introduce His Excellency, the Egyptian ambassador to Egypt, to give us a few words.
Thank you, Khalid. My name is Sharif Kamel. I'm the Egyptian ambassador to the UK. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning, and I welcome especially the British businesses and British companies that are present this morning here with us. It's also a pleasure to speak after Sir Jeffrey Donaldson. I'm quite new here in London. I've been here for the last 5 months, and the first time I met Sir Jeffrey, I felt that he knows more about Egypt than probably many of us around the world. And it was really a pleasure because that's the kind of partnership that we do have. I'm lucky also because I come to London at a time when our political relationship between Egypt and the UK is really in an excellent shape. There is a strong will on the side of the Egyptian government, and I can also say that we know that it's the same on the UK government to do more together, to work together, to invest in each other in many ways. And this actually makes a lot of sense because Egypt is, as Sir Donaldson was saying, is well located in the Middle East, but also is the biggest Arab country, is actually not only a big market in its own right with 105 million Egyptians, but also Egypt historically has always set the trends in the Arab world. We are also a gateway to Africa. We have the Suez Canal, which is, like we were saying yesterday, sees 10% of the international trade. There is a huge project to develop the Suez Canal zone with an industrial zone, with the logistical sites. And we want to attract more British companies, more British industries, more British technologies to come to Egypt. I have to say that when we compare the relationship in terms of the business relationship between Egypt and the UK, other European countries, big European countries that are comparable to the UK, are taking advantage of what's happening in Egypt, the good things that are happening in Egypt, because over the last 5 or 6 years, the changes that are happening in Egypt are quite unparalleled before in terms of the economic reforms, in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of trying to ease business, and also in terms of the role of the private sector. Only this week, we had an announcement by the Prime Minister in terms of, and obviously everybody around the world is trying to get a better sense of the impact of the crisis we are witnessing in Europe on everyone around the world. And we had an announcement in terms of the impact of that crisis, but more importantly, what Egypt intends to do as a priority over the next few weeks and months. And a very important part of this was to have more dependence on the private sector and the private sector role. And that's Egyptian private sector, because they play an important role in Egypt, but also attracting and partnering with private sector all around the world. I wish that the UK and what we heard from Sir Donaldson this morning is testimony to this, and also other British companies. Over the last 2 days, I had the privilege of listening to British members of BIBA as well, and I think they tell the story best because they are British companies already working in Egypt, knowing the changes that have happened in Egypt over the last 5 or 6 years. They're seeing the profits and the gains that we are offering in Egypt. I'm inviting everyone to benefit from the presence of the biggest BIBA mission in London this week. I know that we're going to have a very specialized panel that is going to explain many of the details about the different sectors, the different opportunities. But as we said, you have a strong team in Cairo, and we, the embassy and our trade office here also in London are present. BIBA, we have been discussing also having sectorial missions throughout the year, but also we have the Egyptian British Chamber that is here in London. We have so many channels that we want to communicate through, so please take advantage of this, and you are very much welcome to learn more about Egypt. Come and visit Egypt, and definitely Sharm el-Sheikh in November. We are going to have the COP27, but also throughout next year we should have more trade missions, we should have more interactions, and I think Egypt is a success story, but it's a success story that's still in the making. With everything that we have achieved in the last 4 or 5 years, we know that the road is still far away from where we want to be, and we want to do this in partnership with many of our friends around the world and partners, and definitely the UK figures as one of those important partners that we want to work with. I thank you all for coming, and I think I'm going to give Amin her chair back and listen to the panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for all the introductions, and welcome. On behalf of British International Investment, we're delighted to host BIBA and all these you very distinguished guests and panelists, of course. So, of course, now we're looking at the event here is to consider how we build back better, and I think we need to recognise we're actually facing 4 crises. So the pandemic is still not over in many parts of the world. We're facing the war in Ukraine, but also the dual climate and biodiversity crises. And so we know that there are many, many opportunities for business-to-business engagement, for government-to-government engagement, as we look to build back better from these 4 crises. But it is essential that we do address physical climate risk and ensure that the private sector is really engaged in providing those solutions. I mean, only yesterday, the World Meteorological Organization said that there were clear signs of humanity's impact on the planet, which was bringing long-lasting effects of extreme weather. And the day-to-day face of the climate emergency wreaked a heavy toll on human lives and has led to hundreds of billions of dollars of damage. Droughts and floods triggered food price rises that have been exacerbated this year, as we all know. And the State of the Global Climate Report, looking at the state of climate in 2021, also found the past 7 years have been the hottest ever recorded. We also heard from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, Working Group 2 earlier this year, that 3.3 billion people are already highly vulnerable to climate change. And unfortunately, the vast majority of those are in Africa, in South Asia, and Central and South America. So the urgency of building back better in a way that integrates climate adaptation and resilience could not be clearer. And so this panel, I'm delighted that we have 5 excellent panelists who all will bring a different perspective to how we can jointly, in partnership, address this challenge and ensure that as we look to invest more, we ensure that our investments are resilient to climate impacts, but also that we bring and we accelerate the business solutions that are going to be needed to address climate adaptation. So I'm delighted to first hand over to Emma Howard-Boyd, who, and I was trying to remember when we first met, when you started Jupiter's, the first impact management, asset management fund, I think, ever globally, back in, I think, maybe the late 90s that we met. And we have obviously stayed in touch ever since, and call you a good friend as well as colleague. So Emma, I think, as was already highlighted, has been extremely involved in the climate adaptation agenda, was on the UK's representative to the Global Commission for Adaptation, which existed from 2018 to 2021. You also co-chaired the Coalition for Climate Resilient Investment, and also chair of the Advisory Board for Centre for Greening Finance Investment, which I'm also a member of the advisory board, so it's a pleasure to be working with you in that context. So Emma, obviously as chair of the Environment Agency, you have been at the forefront of seeing climate impacts here in the UK, and often I see here in the news on Twitter where you, every time there is severe floods, you're there literally on the front line engaging with communities whose lives have been devastated. So could you tell us a bit more about, what do you see really as the challenges for governments, but also what are some of the opportunities for business in addressing climate impacts?
Well, Amelie, thank you so much for that kind introduction, and it's really great to be here on this panel, particularly given Egypt will be hosting the next climate discussions. If I could talk about very briefly another role I have, and it's partly to build on what Sir Jeffrey was talking about in terms of the importance of trade. I'm also an advisor to the Board of Trade and have worked closely with the Secretary of State, Anne-Marie Trevelyan, who also has a key role in relation to COP26, being the Prime Minister's champion for adaptation and resilience. And it is in that context that I got to know her, but have continued to work with her. And yesterday, she was making a very important speech about green trade and how green trade is one of the ways that the world as a whole can move through these crises in a way that brings opportunities. So I did want to highlight that speech because it is well worth a read. The reports that we have seen from scientists show that the time that we now have to act is getting ever closer. And I have been part of various COPs and really see those events as opportunities to drive action, not just from governments, but increasingly from the private sector. And we certainly saw with Glasgow, I think Glasgow will go down as the COP with the finance COP, really making sure that the finance sector has got to understand the importance of not only reducing emissions, but increasingly focusing on the adaptation and resilience agenda. So I'm really pleased that with the Egyptian COP, we're beginning to see resilience rise up the agenda. Because despite having a background in finance, I have found my role as chair of the Environment Agency incredibly important to bring the real world to the fore. As Amelie has said, I am literally, when we do have flooding events take place in the UK, out in communities, often travelling with either our Prime Minister or our Secretary of State for the Department of Environment. And over the time that I've been chair, the last 6 years, we have seen those events happen more and more frequently. But I also know, given the investment that we have been making in the UK to our flood programme, we completed a £2.5 billion five-year programme on time, on budget, and with efficiencies a year ago. We've just started a new 6-year programme with double the investment. But we know from the events that we've seen in recent months that the investment of the last decade has meant that we are better prepared for those flooding events. So it absolutely fits in with the Build Back Better agenda. But I also know that it is important that we don't just see this as an environmental and climate change issue. The UK government, and the Infrastructure Projects Authority has published a report last year which set out that this decade in the UK, some £650 billion will be spent on new infrastructure. If you look at the flood budget, that is a thin green line of defence. We need to make sure that as all of that infrastructure is built in the UK, that it is focusing on net zero, climate resilient, resilient to the heat waves, to the flooding events that we know are already locked into the system, and have nature and nature's recovery at its heart, because we know that some of the solutions to the adaptation and resilience agenda, and I think this is particularly relevant in parts of Africa, are making sure that nature is recovering.
Thank you, Emma. And I'll maybe come back to you a bit later to ask a bit more about what you see as some of the opportunities for UK-Egyptian collaboration based on what you hear.
Particularly around things like the Coalition for Climate Resilient Investment and the Centre for Greening Finance and Investment.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Love to hear more on that. But Ayman, so you're CEO of the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Egypt, and I know we've seen a lot. There was a major coalition of sovereign wealth funds that came together around climate, and you became a member of that in October of last year. But could you say a little bit what you're doing in your role in helping to build the sort of public-private partnerships within Egypt around climate, and also love to hear a bit more about what do you think is needed to really unlock the investment, the scale of investment that will be required, particularly to invest in those solutions that are going to help ensure Egypt remains resilient to the changing climate.
Thank you. Thank you for showing up today. My name is Ayman Suleiman. I started this business by way of background. I am a private equity investment banking professional, so I'm a banker by trade and by education. However, the way we transformed our view on Egypt and how we started looking at that market and to add a specific spin around our role to actually help green the world. And I'd like to start with answering your statement. The last COP was the COP of the financing organizations and financial institutions. If we have it our way, the next COP is going to be the Champions COP. And that is going to be driven by real manifestable projects that are underground, real manifestable strategies that are well laid out around really what is our impact and how can we bring that resilience to the rest of the world. And our greening effect, of course, the theme of the talk of the investment community in Egypt recently in our partnerships around green hydrogen and green ammonia, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and this is a recent find. However, what we see as a market and what we see as an economy, the Egyptian economy has gone through, maybe I'll give you a bit of a macro picture on how we came to where we are today. This morning, following the news on the Sri Lanka default on their debt. This is sad news for an emerging market to go through this. As a sovereign fund, we came to existence back in 2018. The law was passed for Egypt to set up a sovereign fund. And then by 2019, the management team came on board 6 months after COVID hit. And then we started rethinking what's our mandate? How do we make Egypt more resilient? Where do we need to focus on our future composition of our GDP? What is the Egyptian economy going to look like in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, and the future generations? By looking through that lens on the macro picture, we see a well-diversified economy. So we don't need to bother about trying to create new sectors in the economy, but we also see a transition of newly found areas of growth in our economy that can actually benefit the cause. That is, we are an agri-economy. It's thousands of years of agricultural culture, but this is a very old and arcane industry and very resilient to change. So that cultural shift needs to happen. And we are, as an economy, we are a capital-strapped economy. We're not an abundance of capital economy, but we're an abundance of human capital, abundance of land, abundance of natural resources. However, water scarcity remains a big part of our biggest challenge. So the projects that we started to see, how do we address those challenges and turn them into opportunities? So investment in water efficiency became a big theme. So we started looking at how do we make water more efficient, how do we make desalination more efficient, a more streamlined, reliable technology to move on, and how do we make sure that it is a comfortable step for the government to actually heavily rely on that resource while it is the most expensive source of water, given that this is a culture that thrived on the Nile water, enjoying the floods for the years. And so water was never an issue that very old culture had to think about, but now rethinking, reprioritizing. So water efficiency became a big part of our conscious investment portfolio. The government has already started to invest over the past 5 or 6 years in wastewater management, in recycling grey water, in agri-water, and they had come up with a big plan. And Amal and myself were having this conversation yesterday about what is the plan for Egypt to make sure it makes the best use of our water resources, and to actually efficiently build a sustained level of source of usable water. So the master plan started with, let's create an agri strategy. The Agri Strategy will focus on creating new arable land, efficient high-density plantation, and that relies on equipment. So it's a capex laden investment avenue, but it pays off. So the business case does pay off. However, you need to have the manpower, you need to have the capital behind it, you need to have the management behind it, and these are areas of investment opportunities that we are actively looking to invest in. And actually, we had come across existing players in the market, champions, I may call them, that have already found their business model. I saw a very distant plot of land. It's a piece in the middle of the desert. They desalinate their own water. They have access to internet. They run an AI plantation. They grow a very specific set of fresh fruits for a UK supermarket chain. So they have an exclusive export, 100% of their capacity ships to the UK because of a weather window that Egypt fills for that product through the year, and Egypt is the best place to economically source that product. So these guys are scaling up. They're only meeting like 10% of the demand. So they have 90% to go to scale up. Those are the sort of projects that are scalable, economically viable, and these are the sort of the champions we need to start looking for. So that's on one sector, trying to make sure that we have that. And this is the sort of the symbiosis between the British economy and the Egyptian economy, the symbiosis between Africa and Europe. And during the lockdown, Egypt, I think, came through as one of the largest exporters of fresh fruits and vegetables. But this is lots of water going out of Egypt into Europe, while we already suffer our own shortages of water, and we are a net importer of wheat and largest importer of wheat. But wheat is not economically plantable in Egypt at large capacities because it's a rainfall crop that is not economically viable. So these are the sort of the givens that we are working with. So we try and create a net value balance where investing in high value crops that are very water efficient, that would pay off or mitigate our reliance on a net importable high water need crop. That's one piece of our strategy. Another set of strategies on the infrastructure side, of course, going back to desalination. Desalination relies heavily on electricity, and we found that we are very efficient when it comes to production of renewable energy. And I think our co-panelist here is one of the early developers of renewables in Egypt, can attest to how much that efficiency can deliver. We also found that we are investing behind a renewable to X. So there are now multiple uses for that downstream. So renewables are going to be how Egypt can green not only our own impact and our own NDCs, but we can also help positively contribute to a greener planet at large. So in our coalition as a fund, so maybe a little bit of a brag setup. As a fund, we are only 2.5 years old, but our portfolio is 80% green by design. And compared to our peers that are maybe coming to coalitions like the One Planet or MENA, the East Mediterranean, Middle East and Africa coalition of funds, of sovereign funds, they are dealing with legacy portfolio holdings that are not as green as they would want them to be. So we rank very high, but we enjoy the latecomer advantage. So we read the chapter, so that was one of our advantages. But within that context, we also lead by a good example. Egypt does business in a different way. We as a fund, we co-invest. So we're not an investment promotion agency, nor are we an outbound buying on the buy side fund. We are a co-investment fund, so we put our money where our mouth is. So we build our strategies based on those finds and based on those conscious decisions on investing in different avenues. On that, I'll pause.
Yeah, and I'll come back to you in a bit to ask what you're doing with some of the other sovereign wealth funds across the continent ahead of COP27, because I know you're working closely with them. I'll now turn to His Excellency, the Chairman of the Suez Canal Economic Zone. Thank you for joining us. And it'd be great to hear from you what you see as how the opportunities and how the Special Economic Zone can really help accelerate investment in those opportunities that can address climate change.
Well, thank you very much. Let me first thank BII for hosting us here today. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you all for coming. I know Sir Jeffrey had to leave, but I also have to extend a special thanks to him. He has been one of the great promoters to Egypt, but in particular to the economic zone, and he has been very supportive during the years. And really, it is a very important kind of support that we get from him. Well, I think yesterday and maybe today that I've talked a bit about the economic zone, but basically, as you may all know, it's around the Suez Canal itself. So the economic zone is a mix between seaports along the Mediterranean or the Gulf of Suez, in addition to industrial areas that are in different locations around the Suez Canal itself. Totaling 461 square kilometers of area. So that's a real economic zone area that has a lot of opportunities that can be offered in the area. We have identified within our recent studies 16 different sectors for non-industrial and 12 industrial sectors that we believe very much are the most important sectors. They have very good opportunities for localizing in Egypt, to be serving the Egyptian market, which is a huge market, as you all know, but also more importantly to be able to access the region and in particular Africa. We work as a real gateway to Africa. We are very equipped to be doing that, and that's why we have been doing a lot of investment in our ports, in the railway, in the roads as well, so we can have a very strong connectivity, means of connectivity along the Suez Canal itself. So this adds value to the canal itself and to the economic zone per se. Since we are talking within the topic of today, let me focus on the green economy and the green opportunities that we have within the economic zone. But first, let me say that yes, we are looking for good involvement of UK companies into the economic zone. That doesn't mean that we don't have any yet. No, we do have, and I'm pleased to say that the end of last year we had the involvement of CDC in acquiring some shares in Sokhna Port, and this is one of the major developments that took place. We're also in continuous talks with Sharif Al-Kholi here, our friend, for projects related to renewable projects and so on. So I'll focus on three different elements that we're currently working on. One is the desalination, which is a very important element to the economic zone. We're turning all our operation as much as we can into a green kind of operation. So our reliance on the Nile, the water from the Nile, physically from the beginning of last April is completely stopped, and we are now operating from desalination units that we have already constructed. But that is not the end of it, because we will still need a lot of other units to get into supplying our industrial areas and our ports. So this is one of the very important projects that we seek good cooperation, and it is going to be helping us to turn more into a green operation as such. Naturally, when we talk about desalination, we're also talking about renewables, and very important that we address renewable energy in the economic zone at large in a very systematic way. So we are also taking good steps along that, and we are currently finalizing, I hope very soon, the first plant in the economic zone for the production of 300 megawatt of renewables, expandable to 500 mega. And the third dimension, which is what is occupying us for the last few months, is the green hydrogen, green ammonia initiatives that we've been working on. We have all the ingredients to become the hub for producing green fuel, and that's a mix between the location for our industrial cluster itself, where we can house all the needed electrolyzers and have the connectivity to the port through a utility tunnel. And then we have the tank farm and the fueling and the jetties and the license. All this is administered within the economic zone. So it's a very important element that we're working on. We are the downstream part of this, and of course Ayman and the Sovereign Fund is also a big part of what we're doing. So as I've explained yesterday in another event, I don't want to repeat myself, but we already have 6 MOUs that are already signed, and paving the way to come to realization of a financial decision and a real commitment in COP27. As I've mentioned yesterday, our target is definitely beyond that, but the most important thing is to work with all these consortiums to be able to come to a conclusion and officialize the commitment by COP27. None of them is British, but there are others that we are in talking to them, and I think we're going to have at least one, maybe 2 companies that we can finalize with them within the next stage. I was in another meeting yesterday, and I try to make everybody understand this is not a competition. This is not a tender. This is an opportunity where we can house a number of projects because the offtake is there, the need is there, and we can definitely house all these projects in the right manner with the support of the desalination and the renewable power that is going to be supporting these projects as well. Naturally, these projects to succeed, it needs a huge amount of renewables, whether solar or wind, and this is taking part out of the geographical location of the economic zone, but still this is in coordination with other stakeholders in Egypt and specifically the Ministry of Electricity. Adding to it, but not in Sokhna, in Port Said area, we're looking now into a similar project, but with a different composition. It's waste to energy. So again, this is another opportunity where waste is going to be utilized for also generating green kind of fueling as well, which is something that will also bring to a realization in COP27. So in a quick word, the economic zone is very eager to get more and more in communication with interested companies. We have companies come from time to time. I do thank all the stakeholders and partners, whether from the Egyptian embassy here or from the embassy in Cairo. Also with all the support of BIBA and other agencies. So, by the way, I used to be on the board of BIBA at some time, but that is in a different lifetime. So, I know how everybody is supporting our initiative, and once again, I'll be happy to entertain on a one-to-one any business opportunities that arises at the economic zone. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and really great to hear about everything happening in the economic zone, and in particular how sustainable energy, renewable energy, and also linking that to more sustainable water supply through desalination can really contribute towards Egypt's national climate strategy, but also I know you have a national water strategy, and I think as Ayman emphasized, ensuring that looking at how these investments can contribute towards climate adaptation and resilience is going to be a great opportunity for Egypt, I think, to really showcase actually at COP27 how this can be done and demonstrate how to increase adaptation finance in particular, which I know is a big priority for the COP27 team as well as the Africa group of negotiators. So I'm now delighted to hand over to Mohammed Abdallah, who is the CEO of Vodafone. I don't think we need to introduce your company, but certainly you are one of the biggest private sector companies in Egypt. So I know maybe just moving away a little bit from the adaptation agenda to ask you about your net zero strategy, which you are developing. We'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. First, I would like to say that from a Vodafone Group strategy, there was one of the first companies to sign the UN agreement on, around how to reach net zero. And the way we looked at it at the time is that we had a commitment that by 2030, we will be a net zero carbon emissions. And by 2040, all the footprint, which includes what we're producing from even the services that the customers are dealing with us, it's going to be net zero. And for that, there was a solid plan that was adopted by group on how to reach that. And in Vodafone Egypt, we're not different to that. So we've put our strategy internally on how to reach these goals as well. In doing that, we've over the past few years, we've done some activities like some of our sites are currently run by solar panels. Our data center is run by solar panels, but that's not yet what the end of it. What we are working on right now is we're working with the Minister of Electricity and with the regulators in how we can have the whole energy coming for Vodafone Egypt run into solar panels through netting our emissions. This reflects two things. Reflects from our perspective that although that we're not one of the biggest net carbon emission providers as an industry, however, we want to demonstrate that having such measures and as a major company in Egypt, this gives the opportunity for other companies to join and all go into the same agenda that the country has set of strategy to 2030 around going all in green. Adding to that is that I think that this as well gives an opportunity for investors seeing already a provider, a service provider in Egypt who is willing to use for almost 150 meg over the next 5 years. in renewables. So it's it reflects an investment opportunities for all the companies that wants to come to Egypt. I think that this is one of the main ideas this is one of the main things that we're doing. But adding to that, we had even collaborated with Ministry of Environment, where we have done an application called e-Tadwir or e-recycling, which is an application for all the consumers in Egypt that they can give their old laptops, old devices, whatever they have, and put in our stores, and we give them incentive to do that, and we give it to the Ministry of Investment, Ministry of Environment, so they can recycle it in the right way. We've contributed to around 21 tons last year of e-waste through that app. So again, it's another way to demonstrate how we are supporting the concept of going green across all of our activities. I think there is another point that I want to raise here, which is to the British investors, which is a question that I always get when coming to Egypt, or a new CEO coming into Egypt, where he will have a discussion with me about the pains and the gains, as Khaled was mentioning. I think that one of the main things the clear things for investment in Egypt is clear, which is around the macro size, the growth opportunities, the number of the population size, and everything like that, the geopolitical position of Egypt. But there is one thing that is very crucial that usually surprises all the CEOs that comes to Egypt, usually surprises all the investors that come to Egypt, which is the talents. After a while, you will discover that Egypt Talents will be a hub for talents for serving the entire operations across whatever the investment that you're putting in Egypt. It's like tons of Mo Salahs that are uncovered in many sectors, and I think it's really one of the blessings of investing in Egypt.
Thank you. And I know it's a shame our CEO can't be here. He's a big Liverpool supporter, and we love your export of Mo Salah. I'm now going to turn to actually a close relative of ours, Actis. Sherif, you are partner and head of the MENA region for Actis, and I know you've been very, very active in many areas around sustainability and climate. So could you tell us a bit more about what you're seeing in terms of the opportunities, and both on maybe on the energy side, but also on the climate adaptation and resiliency side?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for BIBA for the invitation to be on the panel, and thank you for BI for hosting us today. Actis is one of the largest specialized investors in sustainable infrastructure in global growth markets. We manage around $20 billion of assets under management, and the vast majority of that is actually focused on sustainable infrastructure. Egypt for us has been one of our most important and most rewarding markets for investment since we set up shop there some 21 years ago. We've already invested and committed over $1.5 billion into the market, a significant amount of which has gone into the infrastructure sector. I think over the years we've been proud partners of the Egyptian government as they've embarked on the opening up journey within the infrastructure sector. We were one of the early investors into the combined cycle BOOT program through the City Creator Electricity Generation Company. And then again, when the Egyptian government decided to implement an ambitious program in renewables, we were one of the early investors where through our investee company, Lekela Power, we own the largest wind power station in the Gulf of Suez and the West Bakr Power Station, which you heard about from my colleagues at Lekela yesterday. I think if just 6 years ago or 7 years ago, anyone would have said that Egypt would have 20% of its power mix coming from renewables, no one would have believed that. But it's now become a hard fact through a lot of proactive planning and partnership with the private sector. And I think when you look at the declared intentions to bring that energy mix up from 20% to over 40%, in what is a short period of time of just over a decade. You do the math and you see how big the opportunity for investment is going to be, and that opportunity is only going to be fulfilled through a continued and probably an expanded opportunity with the private sector. I think Egypt has, in many ways, led the way in the region on large-scale projects related to mitigation, and the Benban Solar Park and the large-scale wind power projects in the Gulf of Suez are a testament to that. I think today we feel very excited by what comes next, both in terms of the continued offering of similar large-scale utility-scale projects to fulfill the ambition of the energy mix. But also I think there is a vast opportunity today related to mitigation, which my colleagues on the panel have touched on. And I think there are three areas which I would like to highlight. I think Ayman touched on the water projects, which I think are going to be a very, very important focus over the coming period. I think that already some good work's been done in terms of water efficiency related to agricultural water and grey water recycling. There's an ambitious plan that's been announced relating to water desalination, and I think a little bit like what's happened with the energy mix, we should expect there's going to be a little bit of an evolution on the water mix, and the participation of the private sector into these projects, and how Egypt's very strong solar power capacity that's in place at the moment can be utilized towards that is going to be very, very important. So that's one dimension. The second dimension is how can Egypt take the next leap into renewable power through areas like distributed generation. I think looking at how the use of renewable power as base load power for the commercial and industrial space in the country is going to become a very important opportunity over the coming years. We can already see a lot of our peers in the region doing that in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, and other countries in the MENA region. So allowing that opportunity to develop and take shape through distributed generation of solar and wind power with embedded storage technologies can allow some very large-scale players to diversify and their power mix, but also to achieve their net zero plans in a much faster way. And I think this opportunity can become very, very significant over the coming years. I think in the same vein, and with looking at energy efficiency and looking at sustainable cities in the urban planning of the new cities in Egypt, there are new areas that are going to become increasingly important and attractive for investment, like district cooling, which is very, very advanced in other markets in the region, of similar climate to what we have in Egypt. But in Egypt, it's still probably very nascent. So we believe that is an opportunity that is going to be very, very attractive. And we've actually moved on that opportunity, and we've just announced a major investment in one of the largest district cooling companies in the UAE, with a very, very strong knowledge base and existing projects in the region. So I think as we look to areas like the new administrative capital and other new smart cities that are under development, bringing these technologies as part of the urban planning and as part of making these cities more energy efficient and planning for adaptation is going to be very, very important. And we feel we're well positioned to help with that planning as a partner for the Egyptian government as they look to evolve these plans. So I think there's a lot to play for in the Egyptian market. I think a lot has already been done. A lot of success stories can be told, and I think some of these are going to be showcased later in the year in COP. But there's still a lot to be done, and we feel hugely excited about what comes next.
Thank you. And you just mentioned, obviously, you know, what you're excited about for COP. So thank you for that. And particularly, I think the point about having a good plan around climate adaptation, particularly in the water sector, is potentially going to unlock, you know, significant investment in climate adaptation finance. So I'm going to just now ask each of, working back this way, thank you, Sharif, but also start with you, Mohammed, Emma, Eamon, and His Excellency, to just give very briefly, maybe 1 minute, maximum 2, what do you hope to see come out of COP27, both for Egypt, for Africa, and also collaboration that will be needed in this agenda?
I will echo what Ayman said, which is about execution and detailed plans. I'm building on what Sharif was saying as well. Us at Vodafone are very focused on how to utilize the technology in making the world more efficient and making the energy more efficient, whether using the IoT technologies, whether on smart cities, agri water, whatever, smart agri, and we have all the sectors focusing on that. So we want to have commitments from the private sector and commitment from the governments around regulations that will enable the private sector to deliver these initiatives. And if we manage to deliver that in the COP27, I think it will be very successful and making a better world for everyone.
Great, thank you. So Emma.
I'm really pleased to hear water go up the agenda too. I think different parts of the world have so much to learn from those that are at the forefront